Ready to face your fears head on, conquer them, and create a safer, more prosperous future? Worried that the world has gone nuts and you've become an insanity magnet? Then grab a cold libation, put on your fuzzy slippers, and get ready to create your own safe space. It's the Safe Space Podcast with your host, Tammy D. For more information and episodes, go to www.saferpodcast.com. That's www.saferpodcast.com.
Hey everybody, it's Tammy D with the Safe Space Podcast. Today, I'm really excited to bring our next guest on because she is a California licensed attorney. Now that doesn't make her a bad person, come on, because she's one of the good guys. She actually works in the estate and trust area, which I think is a really highly admirable, specialty in the law. Leila Nakasaka is a California attorney. She was admitted to the bar back in 1996, so she's been doing this type of work for a while. And she specializes in something that I know every one of you is interested in, which is asset protection and estate planning. Believe it or not, it's not just for the very wealthy people. I thought it was interesting that she speaks conversational Japanese, although she's I believe, a California girl, aren't you?
Yes.
Originally? Yeah, you're originally from here. And she was also a judge, a temporary judge. And I don't know exactly what a temporary judge is. I'm going to have her explain that because I never heard of that term before, but she has earned a lot of awards for her work in the judiciary. She's also a serial entrepreneur, a real estate investor, and she knows a lot of different kinds of asset protection strategies. And there are gazillions. There's one to fit everyone, right? There's everyone can benefit from this. She also, in her spare time, which I don't think she has a lot of, she does a lot of reading and photography and stuff like that. Welcome to the Safe Space Podcast, Keila.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Tammy. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
And as I explained to you before when we were talking, it's always been a passion of mine to legally and ethically protect as much of my wealth. To protect it from unnecessary taxes and unnecessary, just things that erode it, right? And that's what asset protection is all about as far as I'm concerned. It's protecting what you've worked really hard to earn so that you can do with it as you wish. Pass it on to future generations if you actually like your kids. All kinds of things you can do with it. So explain in terms of what you do, what really is asset protection and estate planning as far as you're concerned?
I think a lot of people make a mistake in believing that asset protection and estate planning is only for the wealthy. So sometimes when I ask somebody, do you have estate planning? They would say, no, because I don't have any asset. Now, in my opinion, everybody needs asset protection and everybody needs estate planning. And I'm going to tell you why. So for example, estate planning consists of medical power of attorney, advanced healthcare directive, financial power of attorney, trust, last testament and will, assignment of personal property, and HIPAA authorization. HIPAA is federal law that protects patients' information from third parties. So let's say, for example, you have a son in college. Now your son, if he's over to 18, you need a HIPAA authorization because even though you are his mother, you're not able to get medical information unless you have consent in writing. So that's one of the reasons why everyone needs estate planning.
And everyone really has estate planning, whether they know it or not, right? Because if you don't do anything, guess who plans your estate? The state where you live, right?
That's right.
They become your de facto estate planner and they decide where things go. And I think you just hit something, though, that I didn't even realize or think about as a mom. A lot of parents probably do not realize that if their child was injured or incapacitated, they couldn't automatically just go in and make decisions for them.
That's right.
So they couldn't decide to do surgery, for example, even if it was a life-saving surgery.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why you need estate planning, the medical power of attorney or advanced healthcare directive. It's this one and the same. You would need that. HIPAA authorization is usually included in the medical power of attorney. So the other situation is this. Let's say that you are a parent of a minor child. Without proper documents, if something happens to both parents, the minor child does not go to your sister or your brother or your mother. The minor child goes to foster care. You would have to make a petition to the court to gain guardianship. So many years ago, I represented a grandmother. The mother, she was very young, maybe 23. She passed away unexpectedly, and the father was in custody for drug charges. So the child, actually in this situation, without going into too many details, they were twin girls. They were 4 years old, and they ended up going to foster care. So I had to represent the grandmother and petition the court. So this takes, money and time. And in this case, it took a lot of time because the foster parents fought against me because, as you know, foster parents get paid to keep the children. So I had to petition the court and I had to fight this out in court. And meanwhile, the children, and this is very sad, they were sexually abused while in foster care. And this is very common. Now, that's one of the reasons why you need estate planning. The other reason, and surprisingly, when I talk about that situation, sometimes people would say, oh, I'll think about it. I don't know what there is to think about. But when I say that your pet can end up in shelter, then they're very motivated.
Americans and their love affair with their pets. So a pet could end up in shelter. How does that happen?
Because a pet is considered personal property. So if everyone passes away, the pet owner passes away, then the pet can end up in shelter.
Oh, that would be awful. And you always hear these stories of these crazy old rich ladies that leave their fortunes to their cats and things like that. But that's not really what we're talking about here. I mean, for an ordinary person with ordinary assets, somebody that's not in Beverly Hills, what does a basic estate plan look like? What does it consist of?
So it consists of a will, a trust, medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney. So those are the basic documents. Now, if you only have a will, so years ago, this woman, she drafted a will on the internet by herself. And after she passed away, it turned out that her will was invalid. And I'm going to tell you another situation where a will is completely ineffective. So let's say, for example, you have a 401k and you designate your 3 children as beneficiaries. Years later, you decide that all should go to your oldest son because your oldest son ended up being your caregiver. So you draft a will, but unbeknownst to you, that's not what's going to happen. The 401k is going to go to 3 children because that beneficiary designation overrides the will. So let's say, for example, you put your child as a beneficiary of your life insurance policy. That also overrides the will.
Wow. And I think a lot of people don't know that either. That must be a surprise when those things happen. So in your career, you've probably seen instances where you just can't do anything about that once it's done.
I have seen a case tied up in probate. It's not my case, tied up in probate for over 20 years.
20 years.
Think about the expense and the agony.
Oh gosh, 20 minutes with you guys cost a fortune. I can't imagine 20 years.
20 years. And so the reason why you want to do a trust is to avoid probate. I had a situation where this couple had a trust, but the attorney, for some reason, left it up to them to fund the trust, which is it's a common practice. I personally don't like to leave it up to the clients to fund the trust because they won't do it. So what happened was maybe they went, they didn't spend that much money and they got the trust done, but the attorney left it up to the client to fund the trust. Funding means transferring the assets into the trust. And so the house never got transferred into the trust. And then at some point, this woman, even though she was young, she had cancer. And so obviously not the best time to bring up transferring property into the trust. So the property never got transferred. And as a result, it ended up going to probate.
It's not just probate though, right? Because one of the things you and I talked about too was the fact that, especially here in California, it's a litigious state. And if you're a let's say you're a real estate developer, a syndicator, or even an investor, you can be involved very easily. And I mean, they're like good targets for attorneys that are looking.
One of the keys is to be anonymous or obscure and make it very difficult to find your assets and make it very expensive. Now, one of the ways that we do that, I mean, this is a very basic, I mean, everybody has different situations, but one of the things that we advise our clients is not to use their home address to receive mail. Why not? Well, first of all, currently there's a lot of mail theft. So they steal your mail to steal your identity. So that's one reason. The second reason is that it's all over the internet, especially if you have an uncommon name. You can easily find that person's residence on the internet very easily. And in fact, there is this very, very wealthy family in Beverly Hills. And surprisingly, you can easily find his home address on the internet. So some people have estate, obviously I'm assuming they have an estate planning attorney, but just because you have an estate planning attorney doesn't mean you have an asset protection attorney. Yeah, why don't you want your home address on the internet? Because it invades your privacy. One situation, there was a man, he's a real estate developer, and he purchased the property, and there was an organization that was against that. They wanted a different organization to purchase that property. This person outbid that organization, but because he used his home address, these people, they came to his house and blocked all the neighbors' driveways. So you don't want people to know your home address. Surprisingly, a lot of people use their home addresses. Back then, maybe it was okay, but with the internet now, I don't think that's safe. So the other reason why you don't want to use your home address is, let's say that you get a deposition notice. If you get it by mail, you don't have to attend. If you get served in person, you have to go.
So it's never legit to serve somebody by mail?
You can be served by mail, but let's say it's a deposition notice and you get served by mail. You don't have to go.
Wow.
Because there's no guarantee that that person got it, right? Now, what should you do then? What should you use? If you use a post office box, the bank, when you try to open a trust account using that post office box or UPS address, the bank will not let you do that. And with technology nowadays, a lot of financial institutions, not just the bank, they will not allow you to do that using that kind of address. So what do I suggest? I suggest you get a virtual office. What is a virtual office? Virtual office is very cheap. It should be about $49 a month, and that's talking about California. And it should be very convenient. Like you should go and check, what the parking situation is, because it should be convenient because you have to go there to pick up mail. So that's what you should do. If you Google virtual offices near me, I'm sure you can find one.
And that's perfectly legal in most places, right? To use a virtual office to receive mail and things like that. That would also apply to like a lawsuit, right? If you were prone to getting a lawsuit, how would that help you to have anonymity in that case?
So lawsuit, if you get served with the lawsuit, it makes it a little bit difficult, right? Because if you use your home address, it's going to be very easy to serve you. And not just a lawsuit, but other documents too, other legal documents. So that's one of the reasons. So the only thing that I use my home address is for Amazon packages, and they come in a pseudo name. They don't come under my own name. So you can search all you want, you will never find my home address.
I thought that was pretty much impossible to achieve. So you're saying that you can, with the right strategies, achieve a measure of privacy even in the internet age and everything. It's very interesting to me that people still manage to buy that information on the dark web, and you always hear about people's identity being stolen. So when you're doing your trust and estate planning, is identity theft part of the package? Like when you're working with the client, are you going through these steps and saying, okay, we've got all this, but we need to keep you as private as possible?
It depends on what the client's goal is. So usually, let's say you're a W-2. W-2s generally are not that concerned about asset protection. But if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a real estate developer, if you're syndicator, you will be concerned about asset protection.
And you're going to need that. I'm always surprised. I talk to a lot of syndicators, and a lot of them do not have their stuff in a trust. What are the reasons why people don't put or get a basic trust? Like you can get a basic family trust, for example. There's dozens of different kinds of trusts, like irrevocable trusts sometimes people use for tax advantages. So if you're an average real estate syndicator, what do you need to do to protect yourself?
So I would say you need to do an LLC, either Wyoming or Alaska. I like Alaska because, obviously I have to put in the right language, but the statute provides that a judgment creditor's sole and exclusive remedy is a charging order, and the manager of the LLC or FLP, Family Limited Partnership, can discriminate who gets paid, so the judgment creditor can end up getting zero distribution and have to pay phantom taxes as per IRS code 17737. Now, if you know that's the situation, I doubt that you as a plaintiff's attorney would like to sue that entity.
It's not worth it because it's the low-hanging fruit they're looking for most of the time, right?
Right. And then also, you may be hit up with a malpractice lawsuit.
When you involve lawyers, there's a lot of things that could happen to you and for you. So I think with the people that I work with, also financial advisors, I foresee with our economy the way it is right now, I foresee people being sued for giving bad financial advice. Are you seeing that a little bit with financial people?
I'm not seeing that right now, but I have seen that before. Remember back in 2008, a lot of financial advisors were getting sued, and I imagine that this is going to happen this time too.
Under what basis are they suing them? Because when you get with a financial advisor, most of them are careful to tell you that these results are not typical, that this is risky, and so on and so forth. They have all these disclosures and things for you to sign, and they're still getting sued. How is that possible?
Well, in the US, especially California, anybody can sue, anybody can file a lawsuit, right? Now, you may have to go through the process and go to trial, but now, a lot of people file lawsuits without having much evidence, because what happens is the defense, they would rather settle, right? Rather than paying a large amount of attorney's fees to go to trial. I see it all the time. I have restaurant clients and car wash clients, a lot of businesses getting sued. And, so I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there is one guy, well, actually there are a few, but there's one particular guy, he's in a wheelchair, and I don't even think he actually goes to the premises. I think what he does is he goes on Google Maps, so basically he's looking for parking violations. So for so many, if you have a restaurant, for example, you have to have so many handicapped parking spots. And that's easy to see on Google Maps. So you see that, that person violated, so they would file a lawsuit. And most of the time, the defendant will settle because they don't want to incur huge expenses to try this case. Have you noticed that if you go to Have you noticed that certain restaurants, usually fast food restaurants, don't have a mirror in the bathroom? I'm going to tell you the reason why you don't
Wow.
see mirrors. The reason is that according to ADA, the American Disabilities Act, if you have a mirror in the bathroom, then it has to be for everyone, including the handicapped. So you either not have a mirror or you have it for everyone. So let's say, for example, that you have a small bathroom and you can't install a full-length mirror, or you don't want to, then you shouldn't have a mirror. That's the reason why you see restaurants where there's no mirror.
I don't know. That's kind of amazing that people can get away with suing for those kind of things. But the point is, if every single person, regardless of your net worth, is exposed to either lawsuits or is exposed to, as you said, having minor children, in the house that do things and you get sued for that, there's a lot of different scenarios. Auto accidents, is that another reason why people might want to have a trust?
Yes. So there was a situation where my client, this was many years ago, he ran over a woman, older woman, and killed her. Now, you'd think, oh, my insurance is going to cover. Well, there are situations where the insurance will not cover, right? There are exclusions. I was able to protect all of his assets. Actually, I have to tell you that this was the woman's fault because she was jaywalking on a very, very busy street. So it was her fault. I mean, but it's still very sad. All his assets were protected. So they weren't able to get any of his assets. The only thing was the policy limit, which was $15,000 that was covered by the insurance.
Right, they would have got the limit, and if he'd had any kind of umbrella policy, they would have also been able to get that, but nothing else. And I think that's
Right.
the reason I first got interested in asset protection myself, was hearing about the case of Ted Kennedy at Chappaquiddick back in the 60s, and where I was really surprised to find out that the family of Mary Jo Kopechne, who died in that accident, was only able to get the policy limits of the insurance and not touch any of that fabulous Kennedy money. And I wondered why. And so I found out that they had incredible, incredible asset protection designed by Arnold Goldstein. He was kind of like the father of modern asset protection. So it's nice that you brought that out, because, the estate planning and asset protection are related, but they're not exactly the same thing. There's a homestead law in most states, but can you talk about, because people think that their home is exempt, but it's not necessarily in California exempt. There's a limit.
There is a limit. Florida has the best homestead, as you probably know. So California, as of January 2021, raised the homestead exemption from $75,000 to $300,000. So what is homestead? So homestead exemption is the amount of equity that is protected from judgment creditors. Now, if you don't file it, it will still be protected. But if you file a homestead exemption with the county recorder's office, then 6 months of sales proceeds would be protected from judgment creditors.
If you have equity in a business or anything like that, is any of that protected, or is it just your primary residence? That's it.
Primary residence. So the homestead, there are ways that we can protect your business equity, of course, but the homestead exemption applies only to your primary residence.
And in California, $300,000, that's nothing, right? You can't even get a closet for that. So it's definitely, if you live in California and you have a home, that's worth more than a couple $100,000. Well, everybody has a home that's worth more than $200,000, I think, at this point.
Right.
And that's one of the things that they go for in a lawsuit, I suppose. It's your most valuable asset. So
right.
I don't understand why people don't get a basic trust. Is there a reason for that?
I think a lot of people don't want to think about death. It's not the most fun subject. And a lot of people want to think that, oh, that won't happen to me. I still have, 20, 30, 40 years to live. It won't happen to me. Something sad happened last weekend. This is my daughter's friend, very accomplished. She went to UPenn, and this is just very, very sad. She was hiking the Pacific Coast Trail, and I did not know that Mount Whitney is on Pacific Coast Trail. Pacific Coast Trail is from the border of Mexico to Canada. So it takes months. She was very young. I don't want to go into too many details, but she was very young and she ended up passing away. Our days are numbered and we don't know when we're going to be called.
There's other reasons for putting this in trust as well. I mean, also you could become incapacitated.
My uncle, so he was a professor, retired professor, and he became incapacitated. So the last testament, that doesn't have any effect if you're incapacitated. The financial power of attorney will cover that, but he didn't have that. And he didn't have a medical power of attorney either, or he didn't have a living will. So what ended up happening is that he was in a vegetable state for years until he finally passed away. Now, if he had a living will, then he could have dictated under what circumstances he wants to continue living. There are many reasons why you should have estate planning. And surprisingly, a lot of people who are very, very wealthy do not have estate planning. It's, when I learned this, it was shocking to me.
Well, I have some friends on the East Coast that do what you do, and they tell me a lot of celebrities, people that you would think would know better, a lot of high profile people, they were shocked to find out they had very poor estate planning or none at all. Right. So I think it's probably true that more than half the people around don't have any kind of even basic estate planning. So if somebody wants to work with someone like you, or what's the process for you to sit down with someone and figure out exactly what they need based on their own, goals and things?
So even though I'm only licensed in California, because I'm part of one of the largest estate planning law firms, I can handle all 50 states. So the process would be, I would have a initial strategy session to determine what your goals are. Is your goal to protect your assets, or is your goal to avoid taxes? Is your goal to reduce taxes? Different people have different goals. So we would go on a strategy session, and then if we determine that there's a good fit, then I would send out a fee agreement, and then after payment is made, then I send out a design meeting Zoom link. And design meeting is where I take down all the information, who the beneficiaries are, who the trustees are, who the executors are, who the agents are. And then I draft the documents. And then for the signing, I either send out the notary or I meet with the client for the notary. And then I would I would have a mobile notary meet us. That's the typical experience.
Do you work with financial advisors and planners to kind of integrate what they've already done as far as insurance policies and things like that into the whole mix?
Yes. So if they have a financial advisor, I typically like to speak with the financial advisor so that he or she is aware, and that I'm also including that person. Because what I've learned, Tammy, is that if you don't include the financial advisor or trusted advisors, key advisors, let's say I suggest a very complicated asset protection plan, and the financial advisor doesn't understand why I did that, right? Then there's resistance and opposition. So I think it's smoother if I at least involve, not during the confidential meeting, but involve the financial advisor in some capacity.
Absolutely. And also they trust their advisor, and that kind of reinforces your decisions with the client too. It gives you kind of more validation if you're working hand in hand with people that they're already, working with. So I think that would be good. So if somebody wants to talk to you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you and to start the conversation at least?
So they can call my office at 310-359-6558. They can also book a call through my website, which is assetprotectionmanager.com.
And we're going to put those in the show notes, by the way, Keila. So
thank you. And then if you can't remember anything, all you have to do is type in asset protection attorney Beverly Hills.
I just want to emphasize that you do a really great job with people from all different socioeconomic levels. It's not just the people that have 4 Bentleys parked in the front yard. You actually work with ordinary working people that just want to make sure their kids are taken care of if something happens to them, and make sure that the right people get the right things, because as you said, a will is not necessarily, it's just a starting point. It's not even anything that's going to guarantee that your wishes will be followed. And, if you want to create a legacy and make sure that legacy gets dispersed correctly, you need a person like Keila. And the thing is, we don't give, obviously, financial advice or legal advice on this program. You need to consult an attorney about everything that you want to do with your money and with your life before you do it. So I want to thank my guest, Leila Nakasaka. We're going to have her back to talk more about specific kinds of trusts that most people can benefit from, and maybe a couple of other case scenarios where she can tell us why it pays off to get your assets protected. So yes. I want to thank you very much.
You've done it. You've faced the fear and triumphed. Thanks for listening to the Safe Space Podcast with Tammy D. For episode information or to suggest a guest or topic, go to saferpodcast.com. Has the world gone crazy?